Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the communication panel in disbelief. The message had come less than an hour ago. Cale was dead. The words felt unreal, as if someone had deliberately used the wrong letters to form a cruel sentence. Cale, his closest friend in the galaxy, the alien who had become more than a companion, more like a brother, was gone. The memory of their first meeting flashed through Ethan's mind. He had been assigned as a junior engineer on a space station orbiting the Lather system. Cale had appeared as a towering figure with silver-scaled skin and eyes that seemed to shift color with his moods. Most humans would have been intimidated, but Ethan had been fascinated. Cale had a laugh that shook the room, a presence that made even the most confident diplomats pause. Over time, their friendship had grown in unexpected ways. Now Cale was gone, and Ethan didn't know where to begin. He felt a mix of grief and confusion. The message was brief, formal, almost detached. It instructed Ethan to come to Cale's orbital estate immediately. It seemed impossible that Cale, who had always been larger than life, was reduced to a note in a cold system. Ethan's first thought was that there must be a mistake. But something in the way the message had been worded left no room for hope. Cale was gone. The journey to the estate was surreal. Ethan boarded a sleek transport shuttle, his mind replaying memories of past adventures, the time Cale had shown him the crystal forests of Erythra, where light danced across every surface, or the time they had narrowly escaped a band of space pirates because Cale had insisted on thinking like a human, which ironically had saved them. Ethan had always been surprised by how Cale appreciated human ingenuity. "You see solutions where my species sees chaos," Cale had once said with a smirk. Those words now echoed in Ethan's mind as he hurtled through the void. Unsure if he was ready to face what awaited him, the estate came into view, a massive structure floating above the Lather moon like a jewel in the dark. Its architecture was elegant, unfamiliar, a blend of alien curves and humanly recognizable design. Ethan stepped out of the shuttle, feeling the chill of the artificial gravity, his stomach twisting with anticipation and dread. Guards in sleek armor, whose expressions were unreadable to human eyes, approached and led him inside. Everything smelled faintly metallic, clean and cold, yet there was an unmistakable aura of wealth and power. Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place. Lone human among beings who moved with fluid grace and silent authority, he was guided into a vast hall where Lyra, Cale's wife, waited. She was a vision unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Her skin shimmered like polished stone under the soft lighting, her eyes deep and penetrating, the color of molten silver. Her posture was perfect, every movement deliberate, controlled. Yet, despite her elegance, there was a hardness in her gaze, a careful distance that made it clear she did not welcome Ethan's presence. He had met her only a few times during social visits with Cale, and even then, he had sensed a quiet intensity that set her apart. Now, standing alone with her in the vast hall, Ethan felt the weight of Cale's absence even more heavily. "Ethan," she said, her voice melodic but firm, carrying authority that belied her size. "You have received the message. You know why you are here?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. I'm sorry. I can't believe he's gone." Lyra's eyes softened slightly, but only briefly. "Cale trusted you," she said. "That is why you are here. His will is clear. You are responsible now." Ethan's confusion deepened. "Responsible? For what?" "For me," Lyra said simply, meeting his gaze. "Cale left me in your care." The words struck Ethan like a physical blow. He had expected to inherit some of Cale's wealth, perhaps even manage his business interests. But to be left in charge of Cale's wife, the thought was overwhelming. He opened his mouth to protest, but Lyra held up a hand, her expression unyielding. "Do not misunderstand me," she said. "Cale did not leave me as a gift. He left me for protection. Our enemies are many. The galaxy is not kind to those who inherit power and wealth. You must keep me safe, and you must honor his trust." Ethan nodded slowly, though his mind raced. He had never been in a position of authority, let alone one that involved protecting someone from Cale's complex web of rivals. I'll do my best," he said, his voice uncertain. Lyra's eyes softened again, this time with something almost like approval. That is all I ask. Come, I will show you your new responsibilities." They walked through the estate, passing hallways filled with alien technology and priceless artifacts. Ethan marveled at the sheer scale of Cale's life, the accumulation of wealth and knowledge that now rested partly in his hands. Lyra led him to a room that looked like a cross between a study and a war room. Walls lined with screens displaying information about Cale's business dealings, political contacts, and even personal messages. Ethan felt like an intruder in a world he barely understood. "You must learn quickly," Lyra said, watching him as he examined the displays. "Cale's enemies will not wait for you to understand. Decisions must be made. Your species' ways may be unpredictable, but they can also be effective. That is why Cale trusted you. You see solutions that others cannot." Ethan felt a surge of both pride and fear. The trust Cale had placed in him was immense, and the stakes were higher than anything he had faced before. He nodded again, trying to steady his nerves. "I'll try," he said, and meant it. Over the next hours, Lyra guided Ethan through the estate, showing him Cale's private chambers, secure vaults, and even his personal laboratories. Everywhere Ethan looked, there were reminders of Cale's brilliance and daring. Yet, there were also signs of danger. Security measures, cryptic communications, and warnings etched in Cale's meticulous handwriting. It became clear that Cale had lived in a world where wealth and power were inseparable from risk. Ethan struggled to absorb it all. He was human, accustomed to smaller challenges. Not interstellar politics and alien enemies who moved with calculated precision, but he felt a determination rising within him. A resolve to honor Cale's trust and protect Lyra, no matter the cost. As the day turned into night, Ethan and Lyra sat together in a quiet observation room, looking out at the swirling nebulae and distant stars. The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was filled with unspoken understanding. Lyra spoke finally, her voice low. "Cale loved you," she said. "He believed in you. That is why he left this to you. Do not fail him." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I won't," he said. "I promise." Lyra nodded, and for the first time she allowed a faint smile to touch her lips. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to give Ethan hope. Hope that they could navigate the challenges ahead, that they could honor Cale's memory together, and perhaps in time, build a bond of trust and friendship that transcended the loss they had both endured. The night passed with little sleep. Ethan lay awake, thinking of Cale, thinking of Lyra, thinking of the impossible responsibilities that now rested on his shoulders. He knew the galaxy would test him, that enemies would come for what Cale had built, that every decision could mean life or death. But for the first time, he felt a spark of confidence. Cale had believed in him. Lyra had begun to trust him. And perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's ingenuity could hold its own in a galaxy that often underestimated them. By morning, Ethan was ready. He stood with Lyra once more, looking out at the horizon of stars, and felt the weight of responsibility transform into determination. Whatever came next, he would face it, not just as a human among aliens, but as Cale's friend, protector, and ally. The galaxy had changed in an instant. But Ethan knew one thing for certain: he would not fail. The first day of his new life had begun. The challenges were only just starting. But with Cale's legacy in his hands and Lyra at his side, Ethan felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. This was not just inheritance. It was a calling, and he would rise to it. Ethan awoke to the soft hum of the estate's energy fields. The room was bathed in a pale blue light, filtering through the transparent walls that overlooked the planet below. Lyra was already awake, standing near the observation window, her gaze fixed on the horizon of stars. She did not turn when Ethan entered, but he could feel the quiet weight of her presence. "I assume you slept," she said finally, her voice calm but measured. "Good. We have much to do today." Ethan rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the lingering fatigue. "I did, as best I could," he replied. "But I still feel like I'm stepping into a world I don't understand." Lyra glanced at him, her silver eyes sharp and assessing. "That is understandable. Kale believed that humans are capable of more than they often realize. You will learn. Must. The galaxy does not wait for hesitation. Ethan nodded. He could feel the truth in her words. Kale had always challenged him to think beyond human limits. And now, faced with Kale's enemies and responsibilities, he had no choice but to rise to the occasion. Their first task of the day was a review of Kale's business interests. Lyra guided him through a series of holographic displays, showing transactions, contracts, and communications that spanned countless systems. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to absorb the sheer complexity of Kale's operations. Aliens of many species, each with their own customs. Rules and expectations were involved in everything from trade to security. One wrong move could create chaos. Most of this will be difficult for you to understand at first, Lyra explained. Kale relied on human intuition more than most would admit. That is why he valued you. Ethan stared at the data streams, feeling both overwhelmed and determined. He began asking questions, carefully probing for understanding. Lyra answered with patience, sometimes providing context about Kale's methods, sometimes explaining the motives of his rivals. Each answer revealed a world both intricate and dangerous. A world where power was fragile and loyalty was fleeting. By midday, Ethan realized he was beginning to see patterns. Kale had built defenses not only through wealth but through alliances and clever manipulation of systems. He had prepared for every possibility, but some threats were still active, even after his death. Ethan felt a chill at the thought. Lyra noticed his concern. "You are beginning to understand," she said softly. "Do not fear the challenges. Embrace them." That is what Kale would have wanted. After lunch, Lyra introduced Ethan to the estate's security systems. These were unlike anything he had seen before: shields that could deflect energy weapons, drones that patrolled the halls silently, and encrypted networks designed to track intruders long before they arrived. Lyra explained the routines, the algorithms, and the contingency plans. Ethan listened intently, asking questions, learning quickly. "You adapt faster than I expected," Lyra remarked, her tone almost approving. "Perhaps Kale was right about you." Ethan smiled, feeling a small spark of pride. "I'm trying. I know it's important." Their training was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Red lights flashed throughout the estate, and an automated voice warned of an unauthorized entry in one of the lower sectors. Ethan's heart raced. This was the first real test of what Lyra had taught him. They hurried to the command center, where Lyra quickly assessed the situation. "It's a reconnaissance team," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "They are probing our defenses. If we handle this correctly, we can prevent them from discovering anything significant." Ethan followed her instructions, assisting with the system controls and monitoring the intruders' movements. To his surprise, his human intuition allowed him to notice a pattern that Lyra initially missed up. Small vulnerability in the scanning algorithms that could be exploited to trap the intruders. Lyra raised an eyebrow, pressed. "You see solutions differently," she said quietly. Kale always admired that. Together, they activated the estate's defensive systems. Energy fields shimmered, drones moved into position, and the intruders were quickly contained without harm. Ethan felt a rush of exhilaration. For the first time, he realized he could truly contribute to Kale's legacy, after the threat was neutralized. Lyra led Ethan to the estate's private library. Rows of shelves held not only books and digital archives, but also artifacts from countless worlds. Each object seemed to carry a story, a fragment of Kale's life and achievements. Ethan wandered among them, his fingers brushing over smooth surfaces. Intricate carvings and holographic displays of ancient technology. Kale valued knowledge, Lyra said, joining him. He believed that understanding others' cultures, species, histories, was the key to survival and success. "You must study as he did," Ethan nodded, absorbing her words. The responsibility was heavy, but it was also inspiring. He realized that Kale's wealth and power were not just material. They were built on intelligence, strategy, and an understanding of life that transcended species. As evening approached, Lyra and Ethan shared a quiet meal in the estate's dining hall. The conversation was tentative at first, filled with practical discussions about security, alliances, and the day's events. Slowly it shifted to memories of Kale. Ethan recounted stories of their adventures, of Kale's humor, his daring, and his generosity. Lyra listened, sometimes smiling faintly, sometimes silent, her expression reflective. "You see," she said finally, "Kale was complicated. Many underestimated him, but he understood more than anyone gave him credit for. He trusted you because he knew you could rise to meet challenges that would break others." Ethan felt a mixture of pride and humility. The trust Kale had placed in him was immense, and the weight of it pressed heavily on his shoulders. Yet he also felt a growing bond with Lyra, despite her initial distance. There was a shared understanding forming between them, a recognition that they were allies, facing the dangers of the galaxy together. After dinner, Lyra invited Ethan to accompany her on a tour of the estate's outer defenses. They moved through corridors filled with alien flora that glowed faintly in the dim light, past observation decks that offered breathtaking views of the nebulae and planets below. Lyra explained the purpose of each system, the rationale behind the placement of drones, sensors, and shields. Ethan listened, learning not just the technical details, but the philosophy behind Kale's designs. A careful balance of strength, flexibility, and foresight. Suddenly, a distant alarm sounded. A small shuttle had approached the estate without authorization. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "They are testing us again," she said. "Kale's enemies are bold. We must be ready." Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was no longer theoretical. This was real. He assisted Lyra monitoring the shuttle, predicting its maneuvers, and preparing the defensive systems. When the shuttle attempted a covert approach, Ethan suggested a strategy that exploited the shuttle's blind spots, a tactic he had learned from human naval operations. Lyra followed his plan, and the shuttle was forced to retreat without ever breaching the estate's defenses. "You are improving," Lyra said, a hint of approval in her voice. "Kale would be proud." Ethan smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and accomplishment. For the first time, he felt that he was not merely an outsider stepping into a dangerous world, but an active participant, capable of protecting Lyra and honoring Kale's trust. As night fell, they returned to the observation room. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and Ethan felt a sense of awe at the vastness of the galaxy. Lyra stood beside him, her presence calm and steady. "You did well today," she said softly. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges. You must continue to learn, to adapt. Kale's enemies are persistent. They will not wait for hesitation." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He knew that the path ahead would be difficult, filled with dangers and uncertainties. But he also knew that he was not alone. With Lyra at his side, and with Kale's trust guiding him, he could face whatever the galaxy threw at him. That night, Ethan slept with a sense of purpose he had never known. He dreamed of stars, of distant worlds, and of the adventures that awaited. He dreamed of Kale, of laughter and courage, and of the responsibility that had been passed to him. When he awoke, he was ready to embrace the challenges of the day, to protect Lyra, and to honor the legacy of the friend who had believed in him. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, but Ethan felt a spark of confidence. Kale's enemies would test them, and the future was uncertain, but together, he and Lyra would face it. And perhaps, in the process, they would discover a bond stronger than friendship, built on trust, courage, and the shared determination to survive and thrive in a universe that often underestimated humanity. The morning on the orbital estate began quietly, the soft hum of the energy shields blending with the faint light of distant stars. Ethan sat at the edge of his bed, his mind racing. The previous day's lessons and minor skirmishes had shown him just how dangerous Kale's world could be. He knew the real challenges had only begun. Lyra, as always, was already awake. Her presence was calm, precise, and commanding, like a fixed point in the ever-shifting galaxy. She had been observing him from the observation deck when he arrived. "Are you ready?" she asked without turning. Ethan rose and straightened his posture. "I have to be," he said, though his voice carried the weight of anxiety. Lyra finally turned, her silver eyes sharp and assessing. "Good. Today we will test not just your understanding of Kale's estate, but your instincts. A human alone cannot survive in this galaxy, but a human who learns to think like Kale can. The first task was a simulation of an infiltration. Lyra led Ethan to the estate's training sector, a vast area filled with holographic projections of potential threats and obstacles. Aliens from various species appeared in holographic form, each demonstrating unique combat and strategy methods. Ethan had trained with weapons before, but nothing like this. Every scenario demanded quick thinking, adaptability, and understanding of alien psychology. You will face multiple attackers, Lyra instructed. Use your mind as much as your strength. Remember, Kale always valued creativity. Ethan moved cautiously, watching the holographic enemies. At first, he felt clumsy, unsure of the alien tactics. Lyra observed silently, occasionally offering guidance. Anticipate the patterns, she said. Do not act impulsively. Hours passed, and Ethan began to improve. He used human improvisation to confuse the holographic attackers, combining unpredictable movements with quick analysis. Lyra watched closely, her expression showing subtle approval. By the end of the simulation, Ethan had outmaneuvered the system in ways even Lyra had not expected. You have potential, she said quietly. Kale saw it. I see it now. Before Ethan could respond, a loud alarm blared through the estate. Red lights flashed. The simulation had been interrupted by a real threat. Ethan's heart pounded. This was no longer practice. Lyra's expression hardened. They are testing us again. This is no simulation. Prepare yourself. They moved swiftly through the corridors to the command center. Holographic displays showed several intruders approaching the estate, small but heavily armed ships moving with precision. Ethan noticed patterns in their movements that indicated coordination in prior knowledge of the estate's defenses. They know more than they should, Lyra said grimly. Someone has betrayed Kale, or they have been observing us for a long time. Ethan's mind raced. He realized that the humans and aliens underestimated his ability to notice subtle anomalies. He pointed out a series of blind spots in the enemy formation that could be exploited. Lyra raised an eyebrow, impressed. Good observation, she said. We will use it. Together, they activated the estate's defensive systems. Energy shields shimmered and drones moved into position. Ethan coordinated with Lyra, giving instructions based on his human perspective. And for the first time, they operated as a seamless team. The intruders attempted a surprise attack, but Ethan's plan forced them into a trap, and they were repelled without entering the estate. Lyra nodded, approval evident but her expression serious. Today was only the beginning. Kale's enemies are relentless. You must learn to think ahead, anticipate moves before they happen, and trust your instincts. Ethan felt a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion. He had passed his first real test, but he knew the challenges would grow sharper. The reality of Kale's world was dangerous. Their enemies would not hesitate to strike again. After the attack, Lyra led Ethan to a secure room containing Kale's personal archives. The room was filled with data crystals, holographic records, and maps of trade routes, secret alliances, and enemy territories. Ethan's eyes widened at the sheer scale of Kale's influence and the potential threats surrounding them. Kale prepared for every eventuality, Lyra said. He anticipated betrayal, theft, and assault. But even he could not prevent all outcomes. That is why he trusted you to act when needed. Ethan carefully examined the archives, his mind absorbing the information. He discovered notes detailing rival factions, corporate rivals, and even hints of political schemes in distant star systems. Each piece of information was vital, and he realized that understanding it could mean the difference between survival and disaster. As the day passed, Lyra and Ethan continued their study and training. They reviewed Kale's tactical decisions, security protocols, and business strategies. Ethan began to understand that Kale's success was not merely due to wealth, but to intelligence, foresight, and the ability to blend human creativity with alien strategy. By evening, they took a moment to rest in the observation room. Ethan gazed at the stars, thinking about the vastness of space and the fragility of life. Lyra stood beside him, silent at first, then spoke softly. "Cale trusted you because he knew you would adapt," she said. "He believed that a human perspective could complement his understanding. That is why you are here, not just to inherit his wealth, but to continue his work, to protect what he built." Ethan nodded. "I want to honor him. I want to do right by you, by everything he cared about." Lyra's gaze softened slightly. "Then you must learn quickly. The galaxy is not forgiving. Trust is earned through action, not words." The next morning brought new challenges. A message arrived from one of Cale's former associates, a distant ally who had been loyal to Cale for decades. The message was cryptic, warning of an imminent threat from a rival faction known for ruthless tactics. Ethan and Lyra quickly assessed the information and began. Planning their response, they decided to leave the safety of the estate temporarily to investigate the threat. Ethan felt a surge of anxiety knowing that leaving the protective walls would expose them to unknown dangers. Lyra seemed to sense his hesitation. "Fear is natural," she said, "but hesitation can be fatal. You must act, think, and trust your instincts." Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they boarded a sleek vessel, leaving the estate behind. As they navigated through asteroid fields and nebulae, Ethan realized that his human intuition was an asset in ways he had never imagined. He noticed patterns in sensor readings, subtle changes in the star's light, and irregularities in enemy movements that Lyra initially overlooked by the time they reached the target system. Ethan and Lyra had developed a rhythm, a partnership built on trust and complementary skills. They observed a small outpost under the control of the rival faction. From the outside it appeared secure, but Ethan's observations revealed hidden weaknesses. Lyra nodded at his analysis. "You are learning faster than I expected," she said. "Cale would be pleased." They executed a precise operation using stealth and strategy to infiltrate the outpost and gather critical intelligence. Ethan's human ingenuity, combined with Lyra's combat expertise, allowed them to navigate traps, bypass security, and avoid unnecessary confrontation. For the first time, Ethan felt that he truly belonged in Cale's world. During a quiet moment in the outpost, Ethan and Lyra sat together, reviewing the data they had gathered. The tension of the mission had forced them to rely completely on each other. Ethan noticed a subtle shift in Lyra's demeanor, less distance, more recognition of his abilities. "You are becoming more than an ally," she said quietly. "Cale's trust in you was not misplaced." Ethan felt a warmth of pride and relief. He had not only survived the mission, but had proven his value. The experience had forged a stronger bond between them. It's built on shared danger, mutual respect, and growing trust as they returned to the estate. Ethan reflected on the day's events. He realized that the challenges they faced were not just tests of strength, but of intelligence, adaptability, and courage. The galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but together, he and Lyra could navigate it. That night, Ethan lay in bed, thinking about the path ahead. Cale's enemies would continue to strike, the dangers would grow, and the responsibilities would multiply. Yet he felt a quiet confidence. He was learning, adapting, beginning to understand the delicate balance of human ingenuity and alien strategy. Lyra's presence, once distant and intimidating, had become a steadying force. Together, they were not just survivors. They were a team capable of facing the challenges of the galaxy. And for the first time, Ethan truly believed that he could honor Cale's legacy, protect Lyra, and navigate the dangers that lay ahead. The galaxy was unpredictable, dangerous, and vast, but Ethan felt ready. He had faced real threats, survived, and grown. With Lyra by his side, he knew they could overcome whatever challenges came next. The journey was far from over, but he had taken his first steps toward mastering a world that had once seemed impossible to understand. The stars outside Cale's estate stretched endlessly, like threads of silver woven through the dark fabric of space. Ethan stood at the observation deck, looking out at the distant nebulae, feeling the weight of responsibility settle deeper in his chest. The past days had tested him, challenged him, and awakened a part of him he had never fully known. The courage and ingenuity that Kale had believed in, and Lyra had begun to trust. Lyra approached silently, her presence calm but commanding. "We cannot remain here," she said. "Kale's enemies are growing bolder. We must take the fight to them, or they will find ways to strike even within these walls." Ethan nodded, determination rising. Leaving the safety of the estate was daunting, but he had come to trust his instincts and his understanding of Kale's plans. "Where do we start?" he asked. Lyra led him to the estate's hangar, where a sleek, agile vessel waited. Its surface gleamed under the ambient lights, a combination of alien technology and human usability. Ethan ran his hands over the controls, feeling the hum of power beneath his fingers. "Kale would have trusted you to pilot this," Lyra said. Noting the mixture of excitement and tension in his expression, their first destination was a distant system known for harboring one of the rival factions that had tested the estate's defenses. Intelligence suggested that this faction was involved in smuggling weapons and information to hostile planets, threatening both trade and political stability. For Ethan, it was a chance not only to protect Kale's legacy, but to prove that a human could stand as an equal in this galaxy of alien strategy and power. The journey through the asteroid belt was treacherous. Massive rocks drifted silently, some glowing faintly from collisions with nearby suns. Ethan's human intuition proved invaluable. He noticed subtle shifts in gravity fields and asteroid trajectories that the automated systems had not fully accounted for. Lyra followed his lead, adjusting the vessel's path smoothly. "You anticipate well," she said quietly, her tone carrying approval. Kale always valued a mind that could see beyond the obvious. When they emerged from the asteroid field, the rival faction's base appeared, a sprawling structure orbiting a barren moon. Its surface dotted with landing pads, energy shields, and docking ships. Ethan and Lyra observed quietly from their vessel, analyzing patterns of movement, patrol routines, and weak points in the defenses. "This is not just a simple outpost," Lyra said. "They are prepared for an attack. We must be careful." Ethan considered the data, then suggested a strategy that combined stealth and distraction. A tactic he had adapted from old human military exercises. Lyra raised an eyebrow, impressed but curious. "Explain your reasoning," she said. He outlined the plan, small decoy ships to draw attention to one side of the base while their main vessel infiltrated from the opposite direction, exploiting a blind spot in the energy shield. Lyra listened, nodding slowly. "It is unconventional," she said, "but it may work." The execution was tense. Decoy ships darted forward, triggering alarms and drawing enemy fire. Ethan guided their main vessel through the blind spot, avoiding detection. The combination of his unpredictability and Lyra's precision allowed them to slip inside the base. Once inside, they accessed critical data, discovering shipment routes, enemy contacts, and plans for further attacks on Kale's remaining interests. During the operation, Ethan and Lyra were forced into close quarters with enemy patrols. Lyra's combat skills were flawless, precise movements that neutralized threats efficiently. But she relied on Ethan's quick thinking to anticipate patterns and avoid traps. Together, they moved like a single entity. Human intuition and alien training complementing each other perfectly. At one point, they found themselves cornered in a corridor with energy barriers blocking their escape. Ethan noticed a maintenance hatch above them, small and unassuming. He pointed it out to Lyra, who assessed it carefully before nodding. "You see what others do not," she said, climbing swiftly while Ethan followed. The hatch led them to a service tunnel, bypassing the immediate danger. Once they secured the critical data, Ethan and Lyra made their way back to the vessel. The base was in chaos, and the rival faction had not realized how thoroughly they had been infiltrated. As they prepared to leave, Lyra turned to Ethan. "You acted decisively," she said. "Kale would have been proud. You are learning not only to survive, but to excel." Ethan felt a surge of pride, but also the weight of responsibility. Each victory was a step forward, but it also attracted attention. He realized that Kale's enemies would adapt, that each challenge would be greater than the last. Yet he felt a growing confidence in himself and in their partnership. The return to the estate was quiet, the stars stretching endlessly around them. Ethan reviewed the data they had gathered, planning how to use it to secure Kale's remaining interests. Lyra watched him silently, occasionally offering insights that refined his understanding. Their bond had grown stronger during the mission. Trust had deepened into something more substantial, and understanding that each relied on the other, not just for survival but for success. Over the next days, they began to expand their operations. They traveled to other systems, gathering intelligence, negotiating with former allies, and confronting smaller factions that had tried to exploit Kale's absence. Each mission tested Ethan's ingenuity, his ability to adapt, and his courage. Lyra's guidance was steady, her knowledge invaluable, but she increasingly relied on Ethan's perspective, recognizing that human unpredictability could be a powerful asset. One evening, after a particularly exhausting mission, they returned to the estate. Ethan was tired, bruised, and exhilarated all at once. Lyra suggested they visit Kale's private garden, a serene space filled with alien flora that glowed softly in the dim light. They walked among the plants. The quiet beauty of the garden, a stark contrast to the chaos of the galaxy outside. "You have changed," Lyra said softly. "Not just in skill, but in understanding. You are learning to think like Kale, to act with courage and foresight. That is rare, even among his closest allies." Ethan looked at her, humbled. "I'm still learning," he admitted. "But I want to honor him, to protect you, and everything he built." Lyra's expression softened, and she allowed a faint smile. "Then you are on the right path. Remember, strength is not just in power, but in wisdom, patience, and trust. You are learning all three." Their next mission brought them to a distant industrial planet, where Kale's former rivals were attempting to seize control of a critical energy source. The planet's atmosphere was thick with toxic gases, requiring suits and careful navigation. Ethan's knowledge of human engineering allowed him to manipulate the environment in ways Lyra had not anticipated. He adapted alien machinery to human methods, creating temporary shields and energy buffers that allowed them to move safely and efficiently inside the rival facility. They discovered evidence of a larger plot, a network of factions collaborating to undermine Kale's influence across multiple star systems. Ethan realized that their battles were not isolated incidents but part of a grander, more dangerous scheme. Lyra observed him closely. "You see the bigger picture," she said. "Kale always valued that ability. Many would focus only on immediate threats, but you are thinking ahead. That is why you are indispensable." Together, they navigated the facility, avoiding patrols, neutralizing automated defenses, and securing critical information. Each step required trust, quick thinking, and precise execution. Their partnership had become seamless human intuition and alien expertise working together as one. By the time they returned to the estate, Ethan felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had faced dangers that would have terrified him weeks before, and had survived through intelligence, courage, and teamwork. Lyra acknowledged his growth with a subtle nod, a respect and trust evident in her eyes. That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he reflected on the journey so far. Kale's legacy was vast and complex, but he was beginning to understand it. He was learning not just to survive in a dangerous galaxy, but to thrive. He had learned the value of observation, quick thinking, and adaptation. More importantly, he had learned to trust Lyra, to work alongside her, and to understand that their partnership was a strength far greater than either could achieve alone. The galaxy remained unpredictable and perilous. Enemies lurked in shadows, alliances shifted like sand, and new challenges awaited beyond every star. Yet Ethan felt a spark of confidence and purpose he had never known before. He was not just a human in an alien world. He was a partner, a protector, and a rising force capable of navigating the dangers that lay ahead. With Lyra at his side, he knew they could face whatever the galaxy sent their way. Together, they would uncover the full scope of Kale's enemies, secure his legacy, and perhaps, in the process, forge a bond that transcended species, memory, and loss. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, Ethan felt that he was ready to meet the galaxy on equal terms. The days that followed were filled with planning, decoding, and waiting. The information Ethan and Lyra had stolen from the rival base revealed something far worse than they imagined. Kale's death was not an accident. It was part of a calculated move by a powerful alien magnate named Vorin Tal, a man with enough wealth and influence to command fleets, governments, and assassins alike. Vorin had once been Kale's closest ally, but greed had turned him into an enemy. He had orchestrated a secret alliance among various rival factions to seize Kale's trade routes, his technology, patents, and even the planets under his influence. Kale had known this, and before his death he had hidden evidence that could destroy Vorin's empire. Now, that evidence was in Ethan's hands. Ethan stood in Kale's old command chamber, looking at the data, crystal glowing faintly on the console. Lyra stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes sharp with focus. "This," she said, "is what they killed him for. With this, Vorin could lose everything." Ethan nodded. "Then we can't just hide anymore. We take this to the High Council. Let them see the truth." Lyra hesitated. "Vorin controls several members of the Council. He will try to silence us before we ever arrive." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure he can't." He turned to the holographic map of nearby systems. Their journey would take them through pirate-infested regions, trade routes swarming with spies, and space that Vorin's forces patrolled. Yet he felt no fear. Over the past weeks, he had learned to survive, to think ahead, and to trust both his instincts and Lyra's judgment. They launched their ship under the cover of darkness. The engines hummed quietly, cutting through the void. Ethan took the pilot's seat while Lyra handled communications and defense systems. As stars blurred into streaks of light during the jump, Ethan felt an odd calmness. "Do you trust me?" he asked after a while. Lyra looked at him, a faint trace of a smile crossing her lips. "I have trusted you since you stood beside me against 50 armed mercenaries without hesitation." Ethan chuckled softly. "I was terrified." "Courage is not the absence of fear," Lyra replied. "It is acting despite it. That is what makes you different from them." Their journey to the Council world took several days. They evaded ambushes, outsmarted bounty hunters, and bypassed coded checkpoints. Each obstacle tested Ethan's adaptability and Lyra's precision. At one point, they were cornered by Vorin's patrol fleet in a nebula, where sensors failed and energy fields flickered unpredictably. Ethan improvised a plan using the nebula's charged dust to overload enemy sensors. He vented the ship's plasma exhaust in rhythmic bursts, mimicking the signature of a dying vessel. The patrols moved in to capture them, and just as they entered the trap zone, Ethan triggered the overload. The resulting surge blinded their systems, allowing him and Lyra to slip away undetected. Lyra looked at him afterward with quiet admiration. "You are becoming dangerously clever," she said. "Dangerous is what we need right now," Ethan replied, managing a small grin. When they finally arrived at the Council planet, the tension was almost unbearable. The massive world floated like a gem among the stars, its surface covered with towering spires and vast domed cities. They landed in the diplomatic sector, where security was strict and the air filled with the hum of ships and conversations in hundreds of alien tongues. But before they could even present their case, Lyra detected something wrong. Their ship's sensors picked up strange signals tracking beacons that weren't there before. Vorin's forces had found them. Ethan's voice was steady. "He's not even trying to hide it anymore. He wants to make an example of us." Lyra's expression turned fierce. "Then we make an example of him instead." They split up as planned. Lyra went to gather trusted allies from Kale's former circle, those who still honored his memory. Ethan took the data crystal and made his way to the Council's main chamber, disguised as a technician. He knew Vorin would have eyes everywhere, but he couldn't afford to wait. The Council chamber was vast, filled with alien leaders of every shape and color. The air buzzed with tension as debates echoed across the hall. When Ethan stepped into the central platform, Dozens of eyes turned toward him. A human standing there was a rare sight. He inserted the data crystal into the main console, activating the holographic projection. Images flickered to life documents, secret communications, and transaction records. Voron's schemes unfolded before the entire assembly: illegal weapons sales, forced trade monopolies, and the secret order that had led to Kale's death. For a moment, silence filled the hall. Then chaos erupted. Voron himself appeared on the upper platform, his tall, angular frame draped in ceremonial robes. His voice was sharp and cold. "This human lies. He was Kale's servant, nothing more. He seeks to steal what was never his." Ethan stood firm. "I was Kale's friend, and he trusted me more than he ever trusted you." Before the council could respond, explosions shook the chamber. Voron's mercenaries had attacked the building, determined to silence Ethan before the evidence could spread. Panic broke out as guards and diplomats scrambled for safety. Ethan ducked behind a console, pulling out the small blaster Kale had once given him. "So much for diplomacy," he muttered. Lyra's voice crackled through his comlink. "Ethan, I'm on my way. Hold your position." He fought to protect the console, knowing that destroying the data was Voron's goal. Several mercenaries stormed the hall, their armor gleaming under the lights. Ethan fired carefully, using the room's reflective surfaces to his advantage. He wasn't a soldier, but he had learned from every challenge. He used his environment, thought faster, and stayed one step ahead. Lyra arrived moments later, moving like a storm. Her precision was unmatched. Every movement efficient and decisive. Together, they held their ground until security reinforcements arrived. The mercenaries were defeated, and the council guards detained Voron, who shouted threats and accusations even as the evidence continued to play above them. When the chaos settled, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side before the council. The evidence was undeniable. Voron's empire crumbled within hours. His influence shattered, his name stripped from every record, and his wealth seized to repay the damage he had caused. The council formally acknowledged Ethan's courage and Kale's foresight. They offered protection for Kale's remaining holdings and appointed Lyra and Ethan as joint guardians of his estate. For the first time since Kale's death, peace returned to their lives. Days later, Ethan and Lyra stood once again on the observation deck of Kale's estate, watching the quiet beauty of the stars. The galaxy felt calmer, but not empty. There was a sense of balance restored, of justice finally served. Ethan exhaled slowly. "It's over," he said softly. Lyra nodded. "For now, but the galaxy never stays quiet for long." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll handle whatever comes next." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the ship faint in the background. Lyra turned to him. "You have done more than anyone expected. You honored Kale's memory and saved what he built." Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "I didn't do it alone." She met his gaze, her expression softening. "No, you didn't." They walked through the garden Kale had loved, the same one where they had once shared their fears and doubts. Now it felt peaceful, almost sacred. The glowing plants shimmered in the dim light, casting gentle colors across their faces. Lyra stopped near one of the larger trees, her fingers tracing its luminous bark. "Kale once told me that humans have a gift," she said quietly. "He said your strength is not in power or technology, but in your heart. You care deeply, even when it hurts. You keep trying, even when logic says you should not." Ethan smiled gently. "Then maybe that's why he trusted me with everything he left behind." They stood together in silence for a while, remembering Kale. The pain of loss was still there, but it no longer felt unbearable. It had become something else: motivation, purpose, hope. As time passed, they rebuilt Kale's legacy. Ethan oversaw trade and engineering operations, bringing in human-style innovations that improved production and efficiency. Lyra handled diplomacy and defense, using her strategic brilliance to secure alliances and ensure peace. Together, they created something stronger than before. Partnership that combined human imagination with alien wisdom. Rumors spread across the galaxy about the human and the alien noblewoman who had defeated corruption and restored balance. Traders spoke of their fairness, soldiers respected their courage, and leaders feared their unity. One night, after a long meeting with new allies, Ethan found himself back on the observation deck. Lyra joined him, standing close enough for their shoulders to nearly touch. "Do you ever miss Earth?" she asked softly. Sometimes, Ethan admitted. "But I think I found something worth staying for." Lyra looked at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Cale would have wanted this," she said. "Not just survival, but peace. A future." Ethan nodded. "Then we'll make sure that future lasts." They watched the stars together, silent and calm. Somewhere out there, Cale's spirit lived on in every choice they made, every victory they earned. Ethan had come to this world as an outsider, a human engineer far from home. Now, he was part of something far greater, a symbol of what humans could achieve among the stars. As the ship drifted quietly through the void, Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction. Cale's wealth had once seemed like an impossible gift, his wife an impossible responsibility. But through courage, loyalty,